we are ready to move into our next session, which is titled, Will the Future Be Feminist? Will the Future Be Feminist? I love it as a question. I'm trying very hard not to answer it myself. So I have a thought, but I'm going to wait to hear. We'll be hearing from Nina Simons. Nina Simons, the co-founder of Bioneers, is a social entrepreneur passionate about reinventing leadership, restoring the feminine, and co-creating a healthy and equitable future for all life on Earth. Right? An advocate for social and environmental healing, she speaks and teaches internationally on leadership and transformational social change, and is dedicated to the value of creating truly diverse collaborations and connections among issues, leaders, and movements. Her new book, Nature, Culture, and the Sacred, A Woman Listens for Leadership, is available in stores everywhere. Please welcome to the stage, Nina Simons.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes! Thank you all for coming back. It's my incredible, huge honor and privilege to be here with these four amazing frontline sheroes who are doing so much for the sake of belonging and healing our broken world. And I especially want to thank the Othering and Belonging program panel and Connie Kagampang Heller and John A. Powell for the invitation to be here. And I just want to say a couple words about each of these four amazing women, because each of them is standing on behalf of not only their communities, but a much bigger we than their own communities. And they're standing in ways that are creative and fierce and clear and inclusive and very powerful. And so I'm tremendously honored. I'm just going to say their names briefly so you can see their slides. And then what's going to happen is that each of them will take about 5 minutes to describe their own paths and their relationship to this topic and this work. I'm going to take about 5 minutes before they do their 5-minute introduction, just to offer some context and framing about this subject that we could have about 3 days of conference about, but instead we're going to talk for an hour or so. And then after their 5-minute introductions, we'll have what Akaya Windwood has described as an emergent conversation. Many of you may know her from the Rockwood Leadership Institute. And so I'll be offering some questions, and each of them will respond as they feel called. Morningstar Ghali, you can read her bio in the back of the program, but she is standing on behalf of not only tribal rights and land sovereignty and missing and murdered Indigenous women and all kinds of legal issues facing Indigenous peoples, and doing it in profound and committed and fierce ways. Thank you. Yeah. Linda Sarsour is, I love what's in your bio as an Islamophobia person's nightmare. Yes. And Linda was one of the co-chairs of the Women's March, the largest march in U.S. history and perhaps around the world, and is just, again, tireless and fearless in the beauty and the clarity of the stand that you make. Thank you. Charlene is working with Groundswell on behalf of all women's reproductive justice and rights, and really, again, making a stand and making visible what so many women and men in this country are encountering in terms of unequal treatment around reproductive justice. And it's an issue so important to all of us, and I'm so grateful for the work that you and Groundswell are doing. Thank you. Yeah. And Saru Jayaraman, let me see how many of you out there have spent time working in the restaurant industry. Please raise your hand. Yeah, right? So Saru has taken on this gigantic organizing task that's not only organizing, but making visible a part of our collective community that's often invisibilized and typically undervalued, underseen, and underrepresented. And Saru's doing an amazing job of raising the issue and organizing a massive community around it. Thank you. So I think all of you know that feminist does not mean women on top. It's probably not necessary for me to say this. Feminist means a world that works for all. And, and it's not just about women and femmes. For me, you know, feminist is about all human qualities associated with the feminine. It's about reclaiming our human wholeness. And it includes rebalancing and reorienting our institutions, our policies, and our relationship to the biggest context of all, Mother Life or Mother Earth. And it's no accident that the way we treat women and the way we're treating the earth are very deeply related. And historically, you know, patriarchal systems have been prevalent in many nations and many communities throughout the world for, depending which historian you believe, anywhere from 500 to 5,000 years. And so this is a deeply ingrained human bias. And really, as has been said earlier in the conference, it's important for us to recognize the ancestors of this movement, that there have been several waves of feminist justice action that have involved major sacrifice, major suffering, and actually, if you care about this issue, it's good for all of us to have a sense of that history and who those women were, and to remember that in the US, women have only had the vote for about 90 years. And before that, women were property. And in Canada, women have had the vote actually in the US for 100 years, and in Canada for only 90 years. White women. Thank you. Thank you. I sit corrected. Right on. And I also just want to name that Valerie Hudson, who's a political scientist who specializes in gender equity throughout the world, and is a co-author of a book called Sex and World Peace. She maintains, with her colleagues, that gender bias is the deepest bias in the human psyche. And it may be, you know, it's certainly among them. So for me personally, being a product of a patriarchal culture meant that I didn't start trusting my own voice until I was about 40. Mostly because I had internalized patriarchal values so much that I compared myself constantly to all the smart white men around me, and pretty consistently came up short. The other thing I just want to mention before I invite our panel into their introductions is that often in the mainstream media and online, there is a lot of focus and attention on how women shoot across the circle and how women break with each other across all kinds of divides, whether they're racial or age or, you know, class, all of those reasons, and orientation, right? But there is much less attention paid in the mainstream media and online to what I believe is actually the greatest underutilized capacity in our human toolkit right now, which is women's capacity to strengthen each other when we're in authentic, deep, aligned connection. And so we want to explore the mystery of both of those things and all of those things with our wonderful panelists. And thank you again for coming back from reception and being with us. And Morning Star, let's turn it to you. Thank you.
Morning Star Gali, Ilakatage Chi'i, Ma'ajumawi is Chi'i. My name is Morning Star Gali, and I am Ajumawi Band of Pit River. I want to acknowledge the Chochenyo Ohlone peoples of this land. I know that Vince and his partner, Louis, provided an opening for the conference here, but I think that as a guest on these lands, it's important to acknowledge our relatives. And so there are 4 Ohlone tribes here in the East Bay Area, and I want to thank them for having us as a guest here. I was born and raised right here in Oakland, California, at the Aim for Freedom Survival School in East Oakland. It was known as the Oakland AIM House, and I was born at a time that the county hospital here, Highland Hospital, had the second highest infant mortality rate in the nation, that Native women were being sterilized on reservation lands across the country. And so my parents were very intentional about having us born at home, having home births for myself and my siblings, and also for all of our cousins. So I was the first of a series of home births, and then we were raised by the students of the Alcatraz occupation that had participated and built a schoolhouse called the Little Red Schoolhouse. That schoolhouse still exists today in the Oakland Hills, and the name of it is Hintil Kuka, and it is known as the Children's Place. And so being raised within a movement that was based on a foundation of love and had that respect, that honored the matriarchy of the divine and of who we all are, and had that equalness and balance, these are all values that I strive to raise my children with today. For the past 7 years, I worked as the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for my tribe, Pit River Tribe, and within this last year, I moved to the Sacramento area and am now working more in advocacy and policy around missing and murdered Indigenous women, as well as addressing the criminalization of Native peoples that has started right here in California with the missionization era, with tribes here in California that were force-marched, just as my great-grandmother was, onto lands that were not ours, our peoples that were enslaved and that were forced into reservation areas, and our Indigenous women that were being trafficked. And so there was an exchange that happened of the stolen land for Indigenous women's bodies, and the soldiers that participated and still continue to participate, so we see that in many forms of the state violence, the interpersonal violence. I am sitting here before you today to speak on the topic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. It is a topic that is very dear and very personal. Just this past week, I lost a sister, the second one within the past 6 months, and I asked her family today for permission to speak a little bit and to tell her story. My sister, Jessica Nicole Alva, is a mother of 6 children, and she was found a week ago Tuesday and had been strangled in her home. I went to visit her and spend time with her family while she was on life support in these past few days, and she passed on Friday, late Friday evening, early Saturday morning. The San Francisco Police Department has ruled her death now as a suicide. They say that this was self-inflicted, going off of the story of her abuser, of her perpetrator, who has a known history of violence with her. He provided a false name, and yet this is still the story that the investigators are going with. And so to sit there with a sister that had everything going for her, that when we're at the forefront of this work and it still affects us so deeply, is challenging. And so I'm here today to share that information, that we're helping her family and contacting the San Francisco Police Department, demanding to know why San Francisco is in the top 10 of cities for missing and murdered Indigenous women, why public information has not been given. And so when Sovereign Bodies Institute contacted the San Francisco Police Department and asked for the information to include in the database on MMIW, all of the information that was sent was redacted. There are 17 cases in San Francisco, and when we cross-checked that with the DOJ list, the DOJ had names that the San Francisco Police Department didn't have, and so I can speak more about that later, but thank you for having me. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to venture to speak for everyone here and say how sorry I think we are for your loss.
Thank you.
And the loss of your sister friend. Linda, would you say? It is Saru next. Thank you. We're sitting out of order. Saru, would you give us your self-introduction? Thank you.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing, and to Linda and Charlene also. Looking forward to hearing you guys talk. So my name is Saru. I am a professor at UC Berkeley and the co-founder and president of a national organization called the Restaurant Opportunity Centers United. We represent the 13 million restaurant workers in the United States. And we are the nation's second largest private sector employer and the #1 fastest growing employer. One in 11 American workers currently works in restaurants. 1 in 2 Americans, as we saw, has worked in the industry at some point in their lifetime, and yet the industry continues to be the absolute bottom of the barrel, lowest paying employer in the United States. And so why this is so critical is that you're looking at the nation's largest and fastest growing industry providing the absolute bottom of the barrel, lowest paying jobs and growing the low wage floor of the economy, so that we're really getting to a place of 1 in 2 Americans working full-time or more than full-time and living in poverty and reaching the highest levels of income inequality in the history of our country. And that is largely due to the growth of these enormous sectors like the restaurant industry that are allowed to continue with poverty wages because of the money, power, and influence of trade lobbies. In our case, it's the National Restaurant Association, which represents the chains, the IHOPs, the Applebee's. We call it the other NRA. It's the NRA that's as powerful as the Rifle Association, but I'm sure most of you haven't heard of it. But in doing research for my last book, we uncovered that the other NRA has been around not 30 or 40 or 50 years as I thought, but 150 years since emancipation of slavery, when it first demanded the right to hire newly freed slaves, mostly black women at the time, not pay them anything, and have them live entirely on a newfangled idea that had just come from Europe to the United States called a tip. So in feudal Europe, tipping was something that was given as an extra or bonus on top of a wage. When it came to the States, it was made basically the full wage, a replacement for a wage because of slavery, because you had a population of black women who were never paid anything, and so why pay them now, even at emancipation? And so we went from a $0 wage at emancipation to the New Deal when everybody was finally given the right to a minimum wage, except for who? Right? Farm workers, domestic workers, also people of color, and tipped workers who were told you get a $0 wage now as long as tips bring you to the full minimum wage. And we went from $0 in 1938 to the whopping $2.13 an hour, which is the current federal minimum wage for tipped workers in the United States. You're talking about 13 million workers, 70% of whom are women. And so I could just stop by saying to you that the largest workforce of women in the United States is paid $2 an hour. And what does that say about the value that the United States places on women, particularly women of color? We are valued at about $2 an hour. But I want to go further to tell you that not only do you have a population of single mothers, 40% of these women are single moms working in IHOPs and Denny's and Applebee's, not only do they have the highest rates of poverty and economic instability of any workforce, they also have literally and statistically the highest rates of sexual harassment of any industry, because when you're a woman working on $2 or $3 an hour in 43 states in the United States, your wage is so low it goes entirely to taxes. You're living completely off your tips. You've got to feed your family on those tips, and you're going to put up with whatever the customer does to you, however they touch you or treat you or talk to you, because the customer's always right. The customer pays your bills, not your employer, which means women in our industry are not told to tolerate harassment. Their managers actually tell them dress more sexy, show more cleavage, wear tighter clothing in order to make more money in tips, which means women in our industry aren't told to tolerate harassment. They're told to go out and encourage it. And the more they can encourage, the better off they are. And when this is the first job for half of America, including I'm sure many of you, this is how we learn as women and young men what is legal, normal, ethical, acceptable in the workplace, so that now we've interviewed lots of older women who tell us, I've been sexually harassed recently in my current career, but I didn't do anything about it because it was never as bad as it was when I was a young woman working in restaurants. So because we've allowed a trade lobby to get away with paying basically nothing to millions of women across America, we have allowed a trade lobby to set the standard for what's acceptable, normal, legal, ethical for women to encounter in terms of harassment their whole lives. And all because we allow corporate America to tell us how a woman should be treated. And so there are 7 states that got rid of this system many decades ago. I'm trying to talk as fast as I can. California is one of them. These 7 states actually got rid of this legacy of slavery many decades ago. So here in California, we require everybody to pay the full wage with tips on top. But we're one of only 7 states that does it. But here in California, we actually have half the rate of sexual harassment as the 43 states with a lower wage for tipped workers, because it turns out when you pay a woman a wage, she actually doesn't feel like she has to put up with being grabbed by the customer because she gets a wage from her boss that she can count on, like every other worker in every other industry. And so we've been, thanks to Me Too and Time's Up, 16 states introduced bills with us to fully eliminate this legacy of slavery, just like California has done, and this year it is moving in Congress. It has a good chance of passing in the House, which would make the House the first House of Congress since emancipation to fully address this legacy of slavery. But we have a very, very long fight ahead of us, a huge enemy in the National Restaurant Association. And I will close by saying, to me, my definition of feminism through this work and over the last several decades has changed from my individual outrage as how I'm treated as a woman and how women are treated, to frankly recognizing that feminism must actually address, if we are feminists, we must address corporate control of our democracy, because frankly that has such a big impact on how most women in America are treated, paid, and the dignity and respect they receive on the job and in their lives. Thank you.
I don't know how you follow that, but I'm going to try. Good evening, everyone. My name is Linda Sarsour, and I am an unapologetic Palestinian Muslim American organizer born and raised in Brooklyn. And I was an intersectional organizer before everyone started talking about and doing intersectionality, before they named the conferences after it, before everyone was running around in the streets hashtagging intersectionality. I understood at a very early age, almost 20 years ago, that in order for us to combat anti-Black racism, we also had to combat Islamophobia and xenophobia and homophobia and transphobia and anti-Semitism and ableism and ageism. I understood at a very early age that we can't talk about gender justice without talking about racial justice and economic justice and environmental justice and every other justice that we all claim to be fighting for. I'm also a truth teller, and in a conference about othering and belonging, it's important to understand that in order for us to be in an authentic space, we also have to tell the truth to one another.
Yes.
We got to be in an honest space.
Yes.
And as a feminist, I always wonder if I do too belong in a feminist movement, one that often is led by white women who, the minute they get really uncomfortable, they run the other way. And so I have chosen to be an uncomfortable leader, one that evolves and wants to have the courageous conversations that includes us understanding that we have to be in a movement where we understand we're not going to all agree on everything. And that a movement that is a true feminist movement in America, in a land where we are all from different backgrounds, different faith backgrounds, people of no faith, where we are workers and we are professionals, where we live in the cities and some live in the suburbs and some live on the farms, and we come from different backgrounds. Some of us are immigrants, some of us are have legacies to forced immigration to America, that we're just not going to agree because we're not the same people. And that I'm trying to be in a movement, and my role in the movement is that we're building what I call a united movement where unity doesn't mean uniformity. Because I'm not trying to agree with everybody in the movement. And I want to be able to have my own authentic voice, that I can bring my whole self to a movement, meaning that I could be unapologetically Palestinian, and that I could be a supporter of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, and that I could be a mom too, and that I could be a daughter of immigrants, and I could be Brooklyn 1,000%, and no one tells me, not that part, might want to quiet this part about you a little bit, because you know some of these ladies gonna get really uncomfortable with that. And so my challenge to all of us as we think about othering and belonging is that it doesn't always mean being comfortable. Even when you are in a place where you actually belong, it doesn't always feel good. Because right now we are in a very important moment, and I'll say this to all of you in this room. We are in a serious situation. Serious, like the most serious in your lifetime. And I am not interested in a conversation about people feeling good. I am interested in a conversation about centering the most broken, pained people in our country who are counting on us to figure out how to get this together and get us back on some track. I'm not saying the right track, because this country's never been on the right track, but at least a track that doesn't harm more people, and that I'm being a little more short-sighted. I'm known in the movement as someone who's very visionary. I think about things that are gonna happen 50 years from now, even a time where I may not be alive to see that time. But right now, I'm short-sighted. Right now, I'm like, are you all gonna get it straight for 2020? And this conversation that we're having is about feminism, and we're just gonna put this out there for people to sit with this. People of color, we're gonna do the right thing. The black women, don't worry about them. They're gonna do the right thing. Just letting you know. My question in this movement, if you are in it, and you are like, I'm a feminist, and I'm talking to my white sisters, this is what I need you to do, because I gotta have a call to action. I appreciate your allyship in the movement. I love that you show up to the conferences. But I need you back in the communities you come from. And I need you to take that 53 and make it 0. That's what I need you to do right now. And the big test that we have, because we have failed this test before. The black women told us when we went to the Women's March, they told me, Tamika and Carter, they said, don't go in there with the white ladies, because they're going to get what they want, and then they're going to leave you like they've done to us before. When they get what they want, they leave. And that's, the right to vote is a great example. And so what I'm asking here is this, the litmus test will be 2020 for me, because I'm still in it, I'm invested, I'm still trying to build with my sisters. But in 2020, if my white sisters allow for us to maintain a sexist, misogynist, racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic administration that is gonna wreak more havoc in our communities, then it's going to reaffirm for me what the black woman told me, this just doesn't work. And so I'm hoping that we don't have to come to that place. So that's my role in the movement. I'm uncomfortable, I understand, I'm controversial, I understand. I can't help it. And I just hope that we get this together.
Just imagine how uncomfortable I feel if I went all of that.
You'd be perfect.
All right. Will the future be feminist? Is an open question. And I have to ask myself, should it be? Because as we've heard on the stage, for many women of color, many poor women, many immigrant women, the notion of feminist comes with a whole lot of other things. And as a black immigrant, you know, mother at 16, growing up in working class, being impoverished, feminism for me has been anti-imperial. It has not been anti-imperialist, but imperialist. That's right. Feminism has meant leaning into a level of supremacy that definitely did mirror patriarchy. You know, feminist was not anti-xenophobic. And so as this black woman, the question of will the future be feminist is a question that I have to enter into with a level of apprehension. Because if we don't actually be sober-minded and talk about that history and talk about the problematic of feminism, just the mere question of it actually situates, as you see on this stage, it situates whiteness. Just the mere fact of saying feminist, and that's a problem. That's a problem because we're having a conversation that makes the assumption that feminism is an aspirational hope rather than a nightmare for some people. And so, but the question then becomes, how do we lean into an aspiration while not ignoring the nightmare? And that is the complex question. And so not ignoring the nightmare means actually recognizing that a feminism that is centered on whiteness is actually complicit in the disappearance and murder of your sister.
Yes, yes.
It means that a feminism that is focused on whiteness and adhering to white supremacy is absolutely complicit in the ways in which women are grabbed and abused for pennies so that they can feed their families. And a feminism that centers on whiteness and imperialism is a feminism that is xenophobic and actually says that we don't belong. And so the question is not whether the future will be feminist, but what kind of feminism.
That's right.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and I think that that's what we need to grapple with. How do we actually think about the aspirations and then look to see where we have faltered? And how do we look at that faltering and not shy away from it, not become defensive, not try to push it back, not try to hide it under the pillow, but have bravery in confronting it directly.
That's right.
And so one of the things that I have to say that I have a problem with is this notion of white fragility when we're talking about white women. I have a serious problem with that, not because I have a problem with white fragility, but because if white women were really fragile, some of our lives wouldn't be so damn miserable. White women are strong as hell, right? And so to me, I think white women should be like real pissed and say, you know, my strength has been here, but you know, what are you using the strength for?
That's right.
And how are we banding together as people that recognize themselves to be women or centering themselves to be that, understanding their being to be that? And how do we actually say that that means something? You know, it means looking down and holding hands and saying, no, we can't have a patriarchy that actually levels people's lives to dust. You know, we can't have a class structure that doesn't allow babies to be fed. We cannot have a human structure that allows people to be killed and disappear. And so, will the future be feminist? I think a sharper question for us will be if feminism has the ability to be anti-racist, anti-imperialist, anti-xenophobic, anti-classist, has the ability to be loving and humanist, then the question is, how do we get there?
That's right.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I want to be here for hours. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm curious to ask each of you, or whoever feels so moved to respond, how would you describe at the most human level what causes the breaks in the history of feminism, what causes white women to turn against other women? What would you say about that, based on your own experience?
Well, I will go.
Go, Charlene. Go, Charlene.
You know, I don't know if it is what causes white women to turn. And I'm saying that because, like, we're all socialized to be. And so I want to really, the problem I think that we always have is that we think that these problems are so personal. You know, and then so if I could just get that person to understand me, then life will be just better. And so it's not what causes white women to turn. The question is really like, why are we building systems and structures that makes it possible for human beings to turn on human beings? That's right. That's really the question.
I think there's a lack of understanding that if you don't center women of color, race, as Linda said, the people most affected, the people most marginalized, if you don't center them, everybody suffers. And I want to give a very concrete historical example related to the history I just shared. So I told you at emancipation, these black women were told, you get a $0 wage, we're going to have you live on tips. There were actually two industries at emancipation that demanded the right to hire newly freed slaves and not pay them anything at all. One was the restaurant industry, and the other was the Pullman Train Company, which was the luxury train liners running across the country that hired black men and called them all George. There's a really great movie you should see called 10,000 Black Men Named George. And those black men formed the first black union in the United States, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, led by A. Philip Randolph, and won the right to a wage rather than having to live on tips. But the black women in the restaurant industry, which is the other industry that demanded the right to hire newly freed slaves and not pay them anything at all, were not so lucky. There was a waitress union at the time that was white women that did not welcome the women who were newly emancipated into their ranks. And so what happened? You ended up with a restaurant industry seeing that it could find workers and not pay them anything at all, and essentially argue to Congress and state legislatures, we shouldn't have to pay our workers' wages, you should pay our workers' wages for us through your tips. And that was codified into law, and when it was, that became the law for everybody, the white women, the women of color, for the men as well. And so by not actually standing up for the black women at emancipation who were told you're going to be paid nothing, everybody's paid $2 now. And so how different would it have been if everybody understood that if anybody's paid $0, that's going to happen to me? And so how different would feminism be if it understood that we cannot all be feminist until everybody is allowed to lead, to succeed, to thrive, and not have to be paid $2 an hour.
So I've been living this the last 2 years of my life, which is why I get fired up about this conversation. The answer for me is privilege. And the privilege is that if a white woman gets uncomfortable, she has the absolute privilege to walk away from the movement and act like she's not a part of it anymore. Because her life is not really that as impacted as the rest of us. I've had many moments in my life where I wake up in the morning and I'm like, forget this movement, I'm about to get out of here, because it's a lot. But I don't have the privilege of doing that. Black people don't have a privilege of saying they don't want to fight for their, right? Like, for me, I have this understanding that, like, I gotta be here. I gotta be here for my people. And also, a lot of people of color, we look at our lives and the way at least we organize as a collective. I fight for my people. White women fight for themselves, for white women. Like, white women are not in the movement being like, I'm here with the white women, I'm repping for the... They come with their own individual connection to a movement. And the very great example is the Trump presidency. So all of a sudden, Trump becomes president and the white women are like, oh my goodness, there's racism in America and misogyny and sexism and patriarchy and xenophobia. We're so outraged, we're about to go in the streets in the millions. And then the women of color were like, welcome to my world. You know, thank God that, and to be quite honest with you, this is a controversial statement that I make, but that's who I am, so it's fine. God, sometimes you gotta see the blessing, right, in the really bad situation. So sometimes I think about this whole Trump situation. I said, you know what? Darn it, if we needed Donald Trump to make sure everybody knew that we've been living in a racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic, sexist country, then shit, like, I don't know, I'm okay. I don't know what to do. Like, I just gotta fight harder. So I think that what I always ask, you know, white women in particular, is that feminism for me also requires that we sacrifice for one another, right? Feminism for me is about women being in space fighting for all women. And when one woman is not at the table, that I'm confident that if I'm not at the table, I know Saru's fighting for me, I know Charlene's fighting for me, I know my sisters is fighting for me. And oftentimes we come from communities and cultures where we are have this we, right? You hear us oftentimes, we say we. And it's not because, we don't believe in the I, but we believe that we are fighting for, and when it comes to us organizing with white women, it's about, well, I'm feeling offended. And so recently you saw with the controversy with the Women's March is that we also, as women of color, understand what's at stake. I don't have a choice right now. We are in a detrimental, bad situation that could get a lot worse. So when I'm uncomfortable in a space, I stay. And then I reflect myself on, wait a minute, what is it about this that's making me feel uncomfortable? Because sometimes I'm not straight either, right? Like sometimes I evolve too, I learn too, we're all flawed people. And sometimes when I'm in a space and I feel uncomfortable, I want to reflect on what is it about me and what is it about what I'm feeling. And I think white women don't have yet that process. Many white women, at least ones that I've organized with, immediately go into the defensive and immediately say, well, if this is not about me feeling inspired and good, then I don't have to be there. And then guess what? It's going to be fine for them if they're not there. So I'm asking us all to sit in discomfort. And discomfort is okay. And it actually makes you a whole person when you are uncomfortable. And it actually pushes you to evolve and be better. And it actually pushes all of us, even us as women of color, we too are evolving. I've learned so much about unlearning anti-black racism as a light-skinned Arab American Muslim. I have learned a lot about unlearning things that are anti-Semitic tropes. I have unlearned, things that I've, heard about, growing up around colorism, around class, around all kinds of things. So if we as women of color can reflect and learn and evolve, then I'm asking my white sisters to go through the same process that we're going through.
And I'll just add that every day when we're talking about othering and belonging, every day our fight and our struggle as Indigenous women, as our two-spirit relatives, is a fight for visibility. It's a fight to be seen for who we are. And so when you don't see who we are, when we don't fit that stereotype of the Plains Indian, the Hollywood Indian, as California Native people, when you come up to me and tell me that I don't look like an actual Indian, which I'm told regularly, when I'm being told that, well, we want to do something about the issue around missing and murdered Indigenous women. We know that it's an epidemic, but it's really painful to even follow this issue. It's really painful to even see the day-to-day. And just as our sister says, we don't have a choice. I don't have a choice to walk away and turn my back on my community. What I have is a responsibility. I have a responsibility to my community. I have a responsibility to my children. I have a responsibility to my sister's children now to ensure that this does not continue to happen. I was sharing before we came on stage that there's been an 850% increase in the past 5 years of missing and murdered Indigenous women right here in California. That California is in the top 5 states. The city of San Francisco is in the top 10 cities. And so when we have an issue of continued state violence, of continued sexual violence against our peoples, we need you to see us as people. We need you to see us as the human beings that we sit here to be. And so until you're willing to recognize and see us for the people that we are, you cannot support us in this fight, because it can't be tokenized, it can't be romanticized as it has been in the past. You have to be willing to leverage the power that you have.
That's right.
Thank you so much, each of you, for your truth-telling, for your outspokenness, for your clarity, and for your fierceness. I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you, from your perspective, what might leading from the feminine and its intersections with other forms of oppression have to offer to transforming our society from one that is focused on polarization and breaking to one that is more focused on bridging and belonging?
Do you mind repeating?
Sure.
Okay, it's a long question, I realize. From your perspective, what might leading from the feminine and its intersections with other forms of oppression have to offer to transforming the structural, cultural, and political forces driving our society towards polarization and breaking rather than bridging and belonging?
All right. So, on this stage, we talked a lot about violence against women. And so when you talk about leading from the feminine, if we don't talk about the impact of what the feminine means and when it shows up in particular bodies, right? So leading from the feminine can be a very romanticized notion if we do not get clear about what that means when it shows up in other bodies, right? And so I'm hearing, I sat here with Morningstar with your story about your sister, and, for myself, the first time I was ever molested was at age 9. And it was interesting because my babysitter left us with her husband. He said, I'll take care of the kids. You have to go, I'll take care of the kids. Because she normally takes us to her aunt. The next day, she was leaving again, and I was terrified. But she took us to her aunt instead, and the house was roped off with yellow tape. Every single person in that house was murdered. And so you're talking about multiple forms of violence that are coming and traumatizing people. So when you talk about leading from the feminine, from a 9-year-old who recognizes the feminine can often mean the violence against you, we have to be careful about that. And so we really need to be talking about what does it mean when we are honestly looking at how society has impacted multiple bodies. And so leading from the feminine might then look like resilience. Leading from the feminine might then look like truth-telling. Leading from the feminine could also look like depression. So we have to be careful about what does it really mean to lead from the feminine, and can we actually hold all of that?
That's right.
So it's a complex question, and we need to not be lured into trying to find simplistic answers for incredibly complex situations that are caught in complex bodies.
That's right.
Thank you.
My God. Deep. That's just, yeah. I mean, this has just been absolutely remarkable to be up here with these. I'm even learning just sitting in the space. I think for me, the reason why I'm invested in this kind of women-led movement, in its complexities, in its hardships, is that I believe in it. And I believe that if we just allow women to lead, we will be in a better situation. And the worst case scenario is how bad can it get if you just let the women lead? I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen, right? So that's where I'm at. And I think that we have also to realize that oftentimes when women of color in particular in movements are engaging in truth-telling, we are then accused of being the breakers. Yes. We are then accused of being the dividers and being divisive. And, the tropes of the angry immigrant woman, the angry black woman, that we're put off. You're supposed to be welcoming and making sure everyone's belonging. And we know this historically, even in war and conflict, where there has been civil war and people massacred in the streets, there's always what they call the truth and reconciliation commissions, right? They always start off with what? Truth, and then the reconciliation. So my reframing of that is maybe courageous conversations and truth are what build belonging. And the running away from conversations that are rooted in truth and sometimes in discomfort are what is breaking us. And it is why we ended up in the situation that we did, because we never wanted to address issues of racial justice, right? And even attempting to talk about race in America is already met with race baiting. This is divisive. Why can't we just all work together? Race is not, all lives matter. Why Black lives matter? This is where that comes from. So what I'm asking for in this women-led movement is not just women leading. It really, for me, is specifically a movement that is led by America's most broken, traumatized women, often women of color, indigenous, Black, immigrant, Black, trans, and right? Why? Because this is important. Because the people who are the most pained and traumatized, those who are the most impacted by injustice, want to see justice first. They benefit from getting to the justice first to alleviate the pain. So if I'm following someone, I want to follow the people who want to get there first. And that is the people that are the most broken and pain people. So what I'm asking for us as we build this women-led movement, and it will be built, people have tried to destroy it even recently. The patriarchy has gotten in there, played with the minds, pinned us up against each other, but the women of color always prevail because we know what's at stake. And we know how the patriarchy works, and we know how racism works, so we don't allow that to happen. That's why we still stand. And so what I'm asking for is, what if we had a movement in America, like the one we've seen recently, where we put women of color in office who are not tokens, who went in there talking about anti-imperialism and anti-colonialism, who are questioning America's strongest lobbies, right? Who are questioning war criminals, right? Who are standing up for the living wage, who are talking about sexual harassment on the highest level, who are talking about gender nonconforming people, who are talking about repealing the Muslim ban, who went in there saying, we are here not to be tokenized and we're not here to window dress, we are here to lead. And they are leading us in a new era. So let's do this in 2020. Follow the lead of women of color. And I promise you, if you do that, not the white woman in the DCCC that said she was going to blacklist anybody that wants to primary white men, and you know what I'm talking about? Like, it's already happening. We didn't learn our lesson. 2020, follow women of color leadership, and I promise you, and you're going to say Linda told us, follow women of color leadership and organizers around the country, and I promise you we will come out of 2020, and we have a long-term strategy to put this nation on a track that respects the human dignity of all people, even ones that we don't agree with that are going to benefit from the work that we do. Because this is about, when we talk about othering, I know there's opposition. And guess what? Even the opposition benefits when we are strong, stand in our conviction, stand in our power, and when we fight for the most marginalized people, and when the most marginalized people are free in America, guess what happens? Everybody's free.
I'll just add that the right to self-determination is the future of having a feminist world, of having, I say honor the matriarchy, and I think that we need to not be afraid to say that. I was with a group of women, and primarily women of color, and even within a setting, they said, well, matriarchy is equivalent to patriarchy, and so how horrible would it look with women ruling? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. It's about having equality. It's about having that balance, because we are so unbalanced right now. And so when we talk about the right to self-determination, the right to our sovereign rights over our bodies, over our families, over our communities, we need to not be afraid. As Sister Linda talked about, sitting within that uncomfortable space, that's how we're going to be able to move forward within our communities and within that goal towards collective healing.
That's right.
I'll try to be quick, but I agree with Charlene. It's so complex that I had to ask you to repeat the question because feminine is not a word that's ever used for me, ever. I'm a bitch. That's what I've been called my whole life. Difficult, that word has been used for me so many times. The Restaurant Association, we're in a war. I mean, they've attacked me, they've put up attack websites, they put my baby's pictures up on attack websites, they've sued us for millions of dollars, we're currently under investigation by the Trump administration. I mean, it's a war, and I'm seen as a bitch, and not just by the NRA, but often by my own brothers and sisters in the struggle, because I'll just say, oftentimes the fight for 15 has not included tipped workers. $15 has gone up, and tipped workers are left behind at $2 and $3 and $5 an hour. It happened in New York, happened in DC, happened in Massachusetts, happened in New Jersey, happened in Illinois. I mean, it's happened over and over and over again. As everybody else goes to 15, the women, and particularly the women of color, are thrown under the bus. And so when I raise that and say, this is not how we should be doing this, I am labeled as difficult and a bitch. And so I have to balance that and that label and that feeling and not feeling feminine at all with the other side, which I think is where you were asking about, which is in an idealized version of femininity, there is a sense of humanity and caring and inclusiveness that we do need. We absolutely need, and maybe this is unpopular here, but I represent 13 million restaurant workers, many of whom are white women, many of whom voted for Trump. And when we asked, why did you vote for Trump? What we understood is that for these women, Donald Trump didn't represent the predator and the rapist, and he represented the good tipper. And if you've been your whole life earning $2 and $3 an hour, and your life is, you rely on feeding your kids on men who come into the industry, come into the restaurant, and you're told your livelihood and your chance to feed your families depends on these men, and you do not call yourself a feminist. You don't even call what you experience sexual harassment. You're calling yourself, what you think of as survival. You're thinking of survival, and this is for white and people of color women in our industry alike. Then I do feel like the need to extend a level of understanding and trying to bring people together at the same time, like Linda, where we are telling the truth and we are fighting the fight and we are being the bitches at the same time. We've got to hold both. That's right. And so I don't see any future for us collectively unless we can reclaim womanism, if not feminism, as both fierce warriors and inclusive humanists at the same time. Woo!
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that word forward too. I mean, I feel like, we are challenged in this moment to reclaim each of us, our whole humanity, which to me means something I sometimes call full spectrum leadership. That's being able to draw from our, yin qualities and our yang qualities, or our, all of our humanity, regardless of what kind of body we happen to be in right now. And for me, I have to say, I am motivated and inspired so deeply by what each of you are doing. And I want to thank you profoundly from deep in my heart for your honesty and your clarity and your perseverance and your courage. And also say that, in study after study around the world, basically every time we increase the equity of women, everything else benefits, right? And the environment benefits, and the clean food and water benefit, and the men benefit, and the babies benefit, and right? So for me, the vision of a truly inclusive womanist movement is profound and powerful. And thank you all for the ways you're each contributing to that, really deeply, and for the ways you each showed up here. Thank you all for being here. Have a great dinner, and we'll see you in the morning.